you have that information that I put on the board in the PowerPoint presentation, along with the notice requirements and some of the various things that we talked about with that. So consideration in a lease is typically rent. We know that it could be, rent in exchange for use and occupancy, but it also could be, I'm going to do maintenance services in exchange for use and occupancy of the unit. So that would be consideration, even though it's not a payment of money. Typically our rent is, of course, a payment of money. When we talk about subleasing, what's the difference between assignment and subleasing? That's on the bottom of 332. When one tenant rents the lease premises to another tenant under a new lease that the original landlord does not sign, that would be called subleasing. So with subleasing, there's two leases. With assignment, there's actually only one lease where a new tenant rents the lease premises from the original landlord and the new tenant signs on to that original lease. So with an assignment, the new tenant pays the original landlord. With a sublease, the new tenant pays the old tenant, the original tenant, and the original tenant pays the landlord. So with a sublease, there's two leases. With an assignment, there's one lease. And those screens explain that, and you can also read about that on the bottom of page 332. We've talked about security deposits. We looked at the Illinois Security Deposit Interest Act. We looked at the Security Deposit Return Act. We talked about implied warranty of habitability. That leads us to our various types of leases. And so if you want to follow along with me, this information is on page 334 and 335 of your book. Okay, so a gross lease is a flat fee that the tenant pays, monthly, usually monthly. All right, so that's just basically that one flat fee. Where we contrast it to a net lease, where the tenant's responsible for paying rent, but also some or all of the costs associated with the premises. So that could be electric, water, sewage, gas, any kind of utility payment in addition to the monthly rent. Okay, so most leases, I would say, are net leases, not gross leases. All right, so net lease is discussed on page 334. In a triple net lease, that would be in a commercial property. The tenant pays for every single expense that there is. Okay, so sometimes in a net lease, a residential net lease, we might see the landlord cover some cost. Maybe the landlord covers the water, or something like that. Even maybe the sewage, maybe the landlord covers that and the tenant pays for gas and electric. So there could be some combination of who pays for what. But in a triple net, usually again on a commercial property, where the tenant's leasing a commercial property, they pay for every single solitary expense. Here's another way that tenants can pay. Okay, I see. Let me just leave my, hold on, I have to leave my person in. Okay, here we go. Okay, you're back in. There you go. Sorry, when I go to do that, it takes me away from my screen. Okay, so how do commercial tenants pay rent? All right, well, there's a couple different ways commercial tenants can pay rent. One is through a percentage lease. And there's a math concept I want to go over with you on page 334 to calculate this. So basically a percentage lease is described on this screen where the commercial tenant is charged a definite monthly base rent plus a percentage of their gross sales receipts exceeding a certain amount of gross income.